The morning light over Maple Hollow was soft, almost deceitful, the kind of golden calm that didn't belong to tragedy. Detective Clara Wren parked her unmarked sedan in front of the two-story home with white shutters and a trimmed lawn. It looked like every other house in the neighborhood, neat, quiet, and painfully ordinary. But the emptiness she felt before even stepping inside wasn't ordinary at all. She stepped out, the crunch of gravel under her boots loud in the silence. A few neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Missing person calls weren't common here, especially not ones like this, and a woman gone without her car, phone, or any sign of struggle. Evan Marsh opened the door before she could knock. Early 30s, tall, dressed too neatly for a man whose wife had just disappeared. His eyes were red, but not swollen, the kind of redness that came from sleeplessness, not from tears. "Detective," he said, his voice even but trembling at the edges. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Clara nodded, stepping into the house. "You reported your wife missing early this morning?" "Yes," he said, wringing his hands. "Lila's gone. I woke up and she wasn't in bed. I searched everywhere. The car's still here, her purse too. It doesn't make sense." She scanned the living room as he spoke. Everything was spotless. The coffee table wiped, cushions perfectly aligned, a faint scent of lemon cleaner in the air. Too perfect. "Did you clean this morning, Mr. Marsh?" He blinked. "No, Lila. She always kept things tidy." Clara glanced at a framed wedding photo on the mantel. Evan's smile was wide, almost forced. Lila's, faint and nervous. She couldn't tell if the tension was from the camera flash or from something older. "Can you show me where she slept?" He led her upstairs. The bedroom door creaked open to reveal a neatly made bed. Again, too neat. On the nightstand lay a phone, its screen dark, and beside it a gold wedding ring. Clara's pulse ticked upward. A missing woman leaving her ring behind never meant something simple. "She never took it off," Evan whispered. "Not once. I don't understand." Clara crouched, eyes tracing the carpet fibers. No dust displaced, no scuff marks, but a faint outline, where something heavy might have stood, lingered near the closet. What was here? "Oh," he said quickly, "a laundry basket. I moved it when I was looking for her." She didn't respond. She simply wrote it down in her notebook. The quiet stretched between them, filled with the hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of a clock somewhere down the hall. "Any signs of a struggle?" she asked. He shook his head. "Nothing's missing. No broken locks, no footprints outside. It's like she just vanished." Clara's eyes swept the room again. The single toothbrush in the holder, the untouched mug on the bedside table, the faint indentation on one side of the bed. Everything felt staged. "Did she seem upset lately? Any arguments?" Evan's gaze hardened for a split second before softening again. "Every couple fights sometimes, but nothing serious. She's been distracted, maybe. Quiet." Clara wrote quiet in her notes and underlined it twice. Downstairs, she asked to see the back door. He led her through the kitchen. The counters gleamed, not a single dish out of place. On the refrigerator hung grocery lists and photos, smiling vacations, anniversary dinners, friends' weddings. Yet all those smiles felt like they belonged to strangers. Clara noticed something odd. The trash bin under the sink was empty. For a family that cooked, that was unusual. "When's your pickup day?" she asked casually. "Fridays," he said. "It's Wednesday." He froze for half a second. I must have taken it out early. I was cleaning. Couldn't sit still." The explanation came too quickly. She didn't press. Not yet. They stood in the doorway, facing the quiet backyard. The morning air was heavy with dew, the kind that clung to the edges of the grass. A swing creaked slightly, moved by a breeze that didn't feel like one. "Mr. Marsh," Clara said finally, "when was the last time anyone besides you saw Lila?" He hesitated. "Monday night. She went for a walk. She liked to clear her head after dinner." "And you?" "I stayed home, watched a movie. She could feel his heartbeat in the silence, the way guilty men often breathe too slowly, too carefully. But she smiled politely and closed her notebook. "I'll need to ask a few more questions later," she said. "For now, don't touch anything. We'll have forensics come by." Evan nodded, his face unreadable. "Of course, Detective. I just want her back." As she stepped off the porch, Clara looked back at the house. Morning sun glinted on the windows, blinding her for a moment. When she blinked it away, she thought she saw something. A faint smear on the glass, like a handprint wiped clean but not entirely gone. It was probably nothing. But Clara Wren had built her career on not trusting nothing. She took one last look at the flawless house, too clean, too calm, too silent, and murmured under her breath, "People don't just vanish, Mr. Marsh. Something always stays behind." Then she walked to her car, already feeling the first shiver of unease crawl up her spine, a sense that the house itself was hiding something under all that polish and light. Something waiting to be found. The Marsh home looked different in the afternoon light, less like a picture from a family magazine, more like a carefully painted illusion starting to peel. Detective Clara Wren sat at the kitchen table, recording her notes while Evan prepared tea he wouldn't drink. Every clink of porcelain sounded rehearsed, too calm for a man whose wife had vanished. "Lila loved this tea," he said, placing a cup in front of her. His voice trembled just enough to sound human. "Chamomile helped her sleep." Clara glanced at the cup. The tea bag floated untouched. "When did she start having trouble sleeping?" He hesitated. "A few months ago. Stress from work. She was an art teacher, you know. Budget cuts. Kids who didn't care. It got to her." Clara nodded, jotting the words down. His answers were too tidy, each wrapped with a bow of sympathy. She'd seen this kind of control before. Grief that sounded like good manners. Later, back at the station, she opened the couple's social media profiles. Smiling photos flooded the screen. Vacations, anniversaries, dinners. "Happy wife, happy life," one caption read under a beach photo. But in the reflection of Lila's sunglasses, Clara saw something else. A phone in Evan's hand, held like a weapon, recording. She leaned back, exhaling slowly. Pictures lie, but reflections rarely do. The next morning, Clara visited Marian Doyle, Evan's co-worker. The woman's hands trembled as she poured coffee. "They seemed perfect," Marian began. "Always together, always smiling. But sometimes when Evan wasn't around, Lila looked smaller." "Smaller?" Clara asked gently. Marian nodded, like she'd spent all her strength pretending. Through Marian's hesitant words, the image of Lila began to form. A woman shrinking inside her own home, her laughter practiced, her eyes tired. Marian mentioned overhearing a phone call once, Lila whispering, "I can't do this anymore," before abruptly hanging up. "Did she ever say what she was afraid of?" Clara asked. Marian bit her lip. Only that he had a temper, but he never left marks. Just words that stayed. Clara thanked her and left. Outside, the wind carried the faint smell of rain, sharp and clean. She thought of the spotless kitchen again, the perfect bed, the missing chaos of real life. Back in her office, she played a voicemail found on Lila's phone. A soft female voice, fragile, exhausted, spoke. "Evan's been different lately. If something happens, just remember I said this." Then silence. Clara replayed the message twice. The pauses said more than the words. In the days that followed, Clara interviewed friends, co-workers, even the yoga instructor from Lila's gym. The same pattern emerged. The picture-perfect marriage no one dared question. Lila was described as kind but withdrawn, Evan as charming, protective, the kind of man who adored his wife just a little too visibly. Protection that looked like possession, devotion that felt like surveillance. That night, Clara sat alone at her desk reviewing the case file. Every line pointed to a marriage built on performance, control masquerading as care. She flipped through printed photos, Lila smiling at a dinner table, Evan's hand gripping her shoulder, thumb pressed tight against her collarbone. Something in that gesture chilled her. She pulled out the initial missing person report. Evan had written, "My wife was anxious lately. Maybe she needed space. But people who need space don't leave their phones and rings behind. They run, and they take something with them." The next morning, Clara drove back to the Marsh house under a gray sky. Evan met her at the door, the faint scent of bleach again clinging to the air. "Back so soon?" he asked, managing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just a few follow-ups," she replied. Her tone was polite, but her gaze wasn't. "Mind if I look around again?" He hesitated. "Of course not. Whatever you need." As she walked through the hall, she noticed a family portrait that hadn't been there before, or perhaps she hadn't seen it clearly last time. Lila's smile looked strained. Behind her, Evan's hand rested on her shoulder again, fingers pressing just a little too deep into her dress fabric. Clara leaned closer. Something about the frame caught her attention. A faint crack along the edge, as though it had been dropped and rehung. She wrote a single line in her notebook. "Control can look like love." As she stepped back outside, thunder rolled in the distance. She looked once more at the neat house, the trimmed grass, the closed curtains. It was a portrait of perfection, the kind people envy until they see what's underneath. And Clara knew, with the certainty of instinct, that somewhere behind those walls was the truth, buried, polished, and waiting to be unearthed. The storm broke overnight, leaving the streets washed clean by morning. When Detective Clara Wren returned to Maple Hollow, puddles glimmered across driveways like mirrors, reflections of calm that didn't belong there. The Marsh house stood still and silent, blinds drawn tight. Clara didn't go there first. She crossed to the house next door. Mrs. Kent answered almost immediately, as if she had been waiting for someone to knock. She was in her late 60s, hair set perfectly, eyes sharp beneath the gentle tremor of age. "Detective," she said in a hush. "I wondered when someone would ask me about that night." Clara followed her into a tidy living room that smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. A cat watched from the windowsill, tail flicking. On the coffee table lay a pair of binoculars. Mrs. Kent noticed Clara's glance and smiled faintly. "I like watching the birds," she said. But Clara knew she also watched the neighbors. "Tell me about Lila Marsh," Clara said, flipping open her notebook. Mrs. Kent folded her hands. "Sweet girl, quiet, always waved when she came home from work. But lately, she looked tired. Not sick tired. Heart tired." She paused. 3 days before she disappeared, I saw her on the porch. She was crying, just sitting there in her robe, head in her hands. "Did anyone go to her?" "I thought about it," Mrs. Kent said softly. "But Evan came out first. He knelt beside her. He didn't comfort her, just whispered something. And she went inside, like someone being called back into a cage." Clara wrote that down carefully, her pen slowing on the words called back. "Did you hear anything unusual the night she vanished?" Mrs. Kent's eyes flicked toward the window. "Yes. Around midnight, maybe later, I heard scraping sounds, like something heavy being dragged. It went on for a while, stopped, then started again." "Could you tell where it came from?" "From their side, near the basement, I think. I looked through my curtains but couldn't see much. Just a light in their kitchen and shadows moving." "Did you see Lila?" Mrs. Kent shook her head. "No. Only him." Clara's heart tightened. "And you didn't report this sooner?" "I told myself it was nothing. They always seemed so normal. And he looked so kind." Her voice cracked. "People like that. You don't think they're capable of anything terrible?" Clara nodded. "That's exactly how they get away with it." After taking Mrs. Kent's formal statement, Clara asked to see her view of the Marsh home. The window overlooked both backyards. Even through the rain-streaked glass, Clara could see the faint impression of a path leading from the Marsh's porch to their basement door. Mud disturbed, grass flattened. "Did you see anyone else near the house recently?" she asked. Mrs. Kent hesitated. "There was a man once, tall, dark jacket, parked down the street. Lila spoke to him by the gate 2 or 3 times. Never long, always looking over her shoulder. I thought he might have been family. Clara's pen hovered midair. Do you remember when you last saw him? The night before she vanished. That detail made the room suddenly feel smaller. Clara thanked her and left, the cat's yellow eyes following her to the door. Outside, the air smelled like wet earth. She crouched near the marsh property line, inspecting the muddy trail Mrs. Kent mentioned. A faint streak of something darker cut across the soil. Maybe oil, maybe blood. Inside the Marsh home, Evan's silhouette appeared briefly at an upstairs window, motionless. Watching her, when she returned to the porch, he opened the door before she knocked, just like before. Detective, he said evenly. Back again? You're making my neighbors nervous. Clara met his eyes. Mrs. Kent mentioned hearing noises the night your wife disappeared. Something being dragged. Evan's smile was quick. Too quick. Oh, that. I was rearranging the basement. Moving old boxes. Lila always told me to get rid of that junk. Did you do it at midnight? He laughed lightly, scratching the back of his neck. Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd be productive. Clara stared at him. The faintest smell of bleach drifted out from behind the door again. You clean your basement often, Mr. Marsh? His jaw tightened. You're welcome to look, if it'll help find my wife. I'll take you up on that, she said. She didn't look back as she walked away, but she felt his eyes following her until she reached her car. From the driver's seat, she glanced up once more, at Mrs. Kent's window. The curtains shifted slightly. A silent witness behind glass, still afraid of what she might have seen. Clara tapped her notebook against the steering wheel, thinking of Lila crying on that porch. Whatever had been whispered into her ear that night had kept her silent. But silence never lasts forever. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky still hung low and gray, the kind that pressed on your shoulders and made silence feel heavier. Detective Clara Wren sat at her desk, staring at the evidence bag containing Lila Marsh's phone. It had been locked since the night she vanished, but the forensics team had finally cracked it open. The screen flickered to life, wallpaper showing a photo of a watercolor painting, soft blues and grays blending like storm clouds. Clara wondered if Lila had painted it herself. There was no missed call history, no recent messages sent, just emptiness. That was what struck Clara most. How quiet Lila's digital life seemed, like someone had started erasing her long before she disappeared. She scrolled through folders until she found one labeled Drafts. There were 11 unsent messages, all written late at night. The first one began simply, M. I can't keep pretending everything's fine. He watches me all the time now. Clara read the next. If I don't make it, please know it wasn't your fault. You tried to help me. I was just too afraid. A chill crept through her chest. The messages became more fragmented, words typed and deleted, rewritten again and again. There was no anger, only exhaustion, the kind of fear that lived quietly inside the ribs. He checks my phone. I think he knows about you. I wish I'd met you before all this. Maybe next week, maybe never. Clara leaned back, letting the phone rest in her palm. Whoever they weren't just a friend. There was tenderness in the words, and desperation. The kind that came from someone trying to love in the dark. She cross-referenced contacts. No one with a first name starting with M. Not in her saved list, not in recent calls. Whoever M was, Lila had been careful to keep them hidden. Clara opened the photo gallery. The last image uploaded was from 2 weeks before Lila disappeared, a blurry shot of a park bench at dusk. In the corner of the frame, barely visible, a man's hand rested on the edge of the bench. Strong, unfamiliar. She enlarged the image, tracing the ring on his finger, silver, worn with a small engraving. Not Evan's. Evan wore gold. Clara's stomach tightened. You had someone else, she murmured. And he didn't know. Hours later, she sat across from Evan in the living room again. The blinds were closed. The faint hum of a refrigerator filled the silence. We recovered some files from your wife's phone, she said evenly. His eyes flickered. Oh? Maybe something helpful? Possibly. Clara paused. Did Lila have any close friends you weren't familiar with? Evan laughed quietly. Lila wasn't exactly the social type, she kept to herself. What about anyone with the initial M? His expression changed. Not fear, not confusion, but irritation, quickly smothered. No one comes to mind. Why? Clara didn't answer. She watched his posture instead, the subtle tightening of his shoulders, his thumb pressing against his palm. Micro reactions, small but loud to someone who'd learned to listen. She wrote messages she never sent. Clara continued softly. To someone she trusted. Someone she was afraid you'd find out about. Evan's jaw clenched. Are you accusing me of something? I'm not accusing, she said. I'm observing. He stood abruptly, pacing toward the window. She was unstable. You'll see that when you dig deep enough. Always imagining things, writing things down, acting like a victim. The words acting like a victim echoed through the room. Clara wrote them mentally in bold. When she left, the sky had turned from gray to bruised purple. She sat in her car and stared at the house one more time. Every time she left it, she felt as though it watched her go. At the station that night, Clara dug deeper. Phone records showed a series of unregistered calls, always between 11 p.m. and midnight, made weeks before Lila vanished. The location data placed them near Riverside Park, the same park where the bench photo had been taken. Clara pulled up the timestamp from that final image. April 6th, 11:42 p.m. The last night Lila Marsh was seen alive. She closed her eyes briefly, the pieces rearranging themselves into something sharper. Lila had been planning to leave. M had been her escape. And Evan, whether he knew or only suspected, had already started closing every door she could run through. Outside her window, the night pressed against the glass. Clara whispered to herself, You didn't vanish, Lila. You tried to run. She picked up her coat and keys, her mind already turning toward the park, toward the shadows of M. The truth wasn't inside the Marsh house anymore. It was somewhere out there, waiting under streetlights, buried in silence and tied to the last message Lila never dared to send. The morning news lit up with Evan Marsh's face. He stood outside his home, framed by reporters and police tape, his voice breaking in all the right places. My wife, Lila, he said, blinking back tears for the cameras, is the kindest, most loving woman I've ever known. Please, if anyone knows anything, help bring her home. He looked straight into the lens as if speaking to the world, but Clara saw the footage differently. She watched from her desk at the precinct, coffee cooling beside her. The tear that slid down Evan's cheek didn't reach his eyes. His tone bent perfectly between heartbreak and control. Grief, Clara knew, was never symmetrical. It came in gasps, in stumbles. Evan's grief moved like choreography. Later that afternoon, she was granted a second private interview with him. The cameras were gone now, the performance stripped away. Evan sat across from her in the quiet of the interrogation room, fingers tapping the metal table, his expression smoothed into calm. You handled yourself well this morning, Clara began, voice steady. He smiled faintly. Someone has to keep hope alive. Hope, she repeated, studying him. You seem composed for someone whose wife's been missing for nearly a week. He tilted his head. Should I fall apart, detective? Will that make me look innocent? The air between them sharpened. Clara didn't look away. It would make you look human. He exhaled slowly, eyes dropping to the floor. I loved her, you know. Everything I did was for her. Sometimes love means protecting someone from themselves. The phrasing pricked at Clara's instincts. Protecting someone from themselves. She'd heard it before, always from men who didn't understand the word control. Protecting her from what exactly? She asked. Evan shrugged. Lila was fragile, she worried too much. Got these ideas in her head. People watching her, following her. She thought she could just walk away from it all. But you can't run from your life, detective, it follows you. Clara wrote the quote down, keeping her expression neutral. Did she ever mention someone named M? His gaze flicked upward, just for a fraction of a second, and there it was. A crack in the mask. No, he said too quickly. No one by that name. He leaned forward, voice dropping lower. You're wasting your time chasing ghosts. My wife needed help, not an investigation. Clara smiled politely. That's for me to decide. When the interview ended, she walked back to her car, the chill of late evening clinging to her skin. She replayed every word, every pause. Evan spoke like a man giving testimony at his own trial. Polished, deliberate, as though he were already practicing the story he'd tell later. She stopped at a cafe across the street from the station, opened her laptop, and began digging into his background. Evan's resume painted him as dependable. 10 years at a construction firm, no criminal record, no complaints. But people's digital footprints always told the truth. On an old community forum, she found fragments, posts under an alias E.M. Builder, complaining about ungrateful wives and women who didn't know what was good for them. Another thread, dated a year earlier, mentioned, sometimes love needs discipline. The words made her stomach turn. Digging deeper, Clara located a sealed civil report from 4 years ago, filed by an ex-girlfriend in another city. The charge, harassment and controlling behavior. It had been dropped quietly after a private settlement, so this wasn't his first performance, just his best one. She stared at the old case summary, imagining Lila reading the same charming smile, hearing the same soft voice, never seeing the pattern beneath. The more Clara read, the more she felt the house on Maple Hollow shift in her mind. No longer a home, but a stage. Outside the cafe's TV played muted footage of Evan's public plea again. His eyes glistened as he said, "I just want her safe." The crowd believed him. Clara didn't. She saw the calculation beneath each tear, the slight pause before he pressed his hand to his chest, as if remembering that sadness had a physical cue. Her phone buzzed. A text from forensics. "We found something in the basement floor seams. Possible residue. Sending team back tomorrow." Clara's pulse quickened. The basement. The same place Mrs. Kent had mentioned. The same night Evan claimed to be moving boxes. She gathered her files and rose from her seat. Through the cafe window, she caught her own reflection. Tired eyes. Steady focus. She'd seen men like Evan before, but this one was clever. Charming enough to fool cameras, cold enough to smile through guilt. As she stepped into the night, rain began again, soft and cold. She whispered to herself, "Let's see what your basement's really hiding, Mr. Marsh." Clara arrived at the construction firm just as the sky turned a bruised shade of gray, rain clinging to the glass facade. The building smelled faintly of sawdust and steel, a place where people worked with their hands and hid their truths behind polite smiles. Evan's co-workers greeted her with wary curiosity. News traveled fast, and the detective's presence had become a silent rumor threading through the halls. One name kept surfacing, Marian Doyle. Marian was waiting in a small break room, her coffee untouched, her eyes rimmed red from a night without sleep. She was in her early 40s, hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun, but her hands trembled slightly as she held the paper cup. "Detective Wren," she said softly when Clara entered. "You said you wanted to talk about Lila." Clara nodded and took a seat across from her. "I understand she came here once to see you." Marian hesitated, glancing toward the hallway before answering. "Yes, it was about 2 weeks before she went missing." Clara leaned forward slightly, her tone gentle but precise. "Tell me what happened." Marian took a deep breath. "Lila showed up at the office without calling. She looked different, nervous, kept checking the door like she was afraid he'd walk in. She told me Evan wasn't who he used to be, that he'd changed." "In what way?" Marian's gaze dropped to her hands. "She said he started keeping her phone at night, monitoring who she spoke to, even her texts to friends. He'd read them. She said she didn't recognize him anymore, that she was scared." Clara's pulse quickened. "Did she say he'd hurt her?" Marion shook her head slowly. Not physically, but she said something that stuck with me. She said, "It is not the hitting you have to fear. It is the silence before it." Clara let the words settle between them, their weight heavy and unmistakable. "Did you encourage her to go to the police?" "I did," Marion whispered. "I told her to leave, to stay somewhere safe. She said she was planning to, soon, but then she thanked me, hugged me, and left. I never saw her again." A faint hum from the vending machine filled the silence. Outside, the rain intensified, streaking down the glass like a quiet metronome. Clara opened her notebook. "Marion, would you be willing to make a formal statement about this? It could help us find her." Marion's jaw tensed. I don't think I can." "Why not?" Her eyes darted toward the window again. A man was walking past, one of the site supervisors, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind who didn't look away when someone stared. For a second, Marion froze. Only after he turned the corner did she find her voice. "Evans, connected here," she said quietly. "He's well-liked, respected. You don't cross someone like that and keep your job." Clara frowned. "You think he'd retaliate?" Marion swallowed hard. "I know he would. Maybe not directly, but he finds ways. He always finds ways." She stood abruptly, gathering her things. "I'm sorry, Detective. Forget what I said. I was mistaken." "Marion." But she was already moving toward the door. "Please, don't contact me again. I have a family." The door shut behind her, the finality echoing louder than her words. Clara remained seated for a long moment, the stale coffee smell pressing against her senses. Fear had a scent, metallic, faintly sour, and it lingered in this room. She closed her notebook, knowing what this meant. Someone had gotten to Marion. Maybe Evan, maybe someone protecting him. Either way, the truth had frightened her back into silence. As Clara stepped into the rain-soaked parking lot, she caught sight of a figure across the street. A man in a black jacket standing too still, too focused. He wasn't smoking, wasn't on his phone, just watching. She blinked, and he turned away, disappearing behind a line of trucks. Clara felt the old prickle of intuition rise beneath her skin. Evan's world was spreading its shadow wider than she'd expected. People were scared, and that meant she was getting close. She took a steadying breath, glancing once more at the building behind her. The reflection in the rain-streaked glass showed her own face, calm, determined, but tired. As she climbed into her car, she whispered, "You can silence her, Evan, but you won't silence the truth." Her phone buzzed. A new message from forensics. "Results from basement samples ready. You'll want to see this in person." Clara's hand tightened around the steering wheel. The storm outside rumbled low, as if echoing her thoughts. Whatever secrets Evan Marsh had buried, the basement was about to speak. Rain still clung to Clara's coat when she returned to the Marsh residence. The sky had turned pewter gray, and the house stood as it always did, too quiet, too staged, like a photograph pretending to be real life. Evan greeted her at the door, his expression fixed in the same mournful mask he wore for cameras. "Detective Wren," he said, voice low. "You're here again. Did the lab find something?" Clara forced a polite smile. "Routine follow-up, just tying loose ends." He stepped aside, and the familiar scent of lemon cleaner hit her immediately. The floors gleamed, and even the air felt scrubbed. "You keep things spotless," she said casually. Evan's lips twitched. "It helps. Gives me something to do." Something in the way he said it felt off. Not grief, but control. She moved through the living room, her gaze brushing over the framed photos. Smiling wedding portraits, vacations on beaches, a life carefully curated. The kind that cracked when you looked too long. Then came the sound. Faint, almost imagined. A hollow creak from below. Clara turned. "Is someone downstairs?" Evan hesitated. "No, just the furnace. It makes noises sometimes." She nodded slowly, then gestured toward the hallway. "Mind if I take a look?" He hesitated only a second too long. Sure, but it's just the basement. Nothing to see down there. The steps groaned as she descended, flashlight in hand. The air grew cooler, thicker, with a sharp tang that didn't belong, bleach and damp wood. A faint hum from the water heater masked smaller sounds. The whisper of fabric brushing against her coat, her own heartbeat in her ears. She paused halfway down. The boards beneath her boots felt uneven, newer. "Mr. Marsh," she called up, voice steady. "When did you last have work done down here?" "Couple weeks ago," he answered. "Had to replace a few planks. Rats got into the insulation. Nasty mess. Rats. Always rats." Her flashlight swept across the floor. Tools neatly stacked, paint cans lined like soldiers. Too neat. Too deliberate. Then her beam landed on a faint discoloration near the stairs, barely visible against the concrete. Clara crouched, brushing a finger across it. The surface was rough, almost grainy. Beneath the chemical smell, something else lingered. Metallic. Faintly sweet. She didn't need to guess what it was. "Mind if I bring in my team to check this?" she said as she climbed back up. Evan's face tightened. "Check what?" "The foundation. It looks altered." He chuckled, but it came out strained. "You think I buried my wife under the house? Come on, detective, that's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" Clara met his eyes evenly. "I think I'll let the evidence decide what's dramatic." His jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Within an hour, the forensic team arrived, silent, efficient, moving like shadows through the house. Evan lingered near the kitchen, watching, his fingers tapping the counter in restless rhythm. Clara stood by as the team worked. They unpacked luminol, gloves, cameras, the quiet ritual of truth-seeking. When the lights dimmed, the basement glowed faintly under the ultraviolet beams. It started near the stairs, small specks at first, like freckles of light, then streaks, drag marks. A hush fell over the team. Clara's throat tightened. Evan's voice broke the silence. "That's not blood. It's paint. From when I fixed the boards." Clara didn't answer. She could feel him watching her, waiting for disbelief, craving control. But she only said, "We'll test it." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You're wasting time. My wife's out there somewhere and you're busy shining flashlights on dust." Clara stepped closer, voice quiet but sharp. "You're right. She is out there somewhere, and I intend to find out how far you made it before you stopped dragging her." The words hung between them, a thin thread of accusation and fear. Evan's mask cracked for the briefest second, eyes flaring with something raw, anger, or panic, or both. Then it was gone, replaced by the weary husband routine. "You should leave now, detective, unless you have a warrant." She turned toward the door. "Oh, I will." Outside, the storm had begun again, low thunder rolling across the neighborhood. Clara watched the rain hit the pavement, feeling the weight of what she'd seen. Beneath that house, the truth was breathing, faint but alive. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Forensics HQ. "Preliminary test confirms human blood." Clara exhaled slowly, eyes lifting toward the house's dark windows. The seller had spoken, and she wasn't leaving this time. The morning after the storm broke gray and heavy, the sky hanging low over Willow Creek Drive. Clara stood in the Marsh's backyard, arms crossed against the damp chill, watching the forensic van pull into the driveway. The hum of generators and the clatter of equipment filled the silence that had long haunted this place. She had barely slept. The luminol traces from the night before hadn't lied. The blood on the cellar stairs was human. Lila Marsh was no longer a missing person. She was evidence. Evan stood on the porch, pale and motionless, a robe draped over his shoulders. He didn't speak as the team unloaded their gear. Ground-penetrating radar, scanners, soil bags, cameras. When Clara met his gaze, he offered a faint, hollow smile. "I told you," he murmured. "You're wasting your time." Clara didn't answer. She simply turned to the lead technician, a woman named Rhea, who gave a small nod. "We'll start near the staircase, Detective. That's where the pattern was strongest." The basement lights flickered as the team descended. The air was colder now, thick with the scent of bleach and old damp wood. Clara followed, her boots crunching against the newly exposed boards. Rhea knelt beside the stairs, gloved hands tracing the seams of the floor. "Recent nails," she murmured. "See the shine? These were hammered less than a month ago." Clara crouched beside her. Same timeline as the disappearance. Rhea's team worked with practiced precision, pulling up each plank, labeling, photographing. Every creak of wood sounded like a whisper from the grave. Then came the sound everyone dreaded, the dull, heavy thud of shovel meeting something not quite earth. The smell followed. It rose in slow waves, unmistakable, nauseating, final. Even seasoned investigators flinched. Clara swallowed hard and steadied her breath. "Keep going." The earth beneath the stairs was soft, darker than the surrounding soil. A few more shovels of dirt and then a corner of fabric, faded, floral, once white but now marred with brown stains. Rhea brushed away the dirt delicately until the outline emerged, a human form, curled tight, as though protecting itself from the world above. "Bag it," Clara whispered. The room fell silent except for the mechanical clicks of cameras and the slow scrape of shovels. The sheets were peeled back, inch by inch, revealing long hair matted with soil and time. Lila Marsh. Even after weeks, her features were ghostly familiar. The shape of her jaw, the curve of her hand, her wedding ring still faintly glinting beneath grime. Evan's perfect marriage had finally told its truth. Clara stepped closer, forcing herself to look, not as an investigator now, but as the silent witness to the aftermath of cruelty. "I'm sorry, Lila," she whispered under her breath. But then Rhea's voice broke through the haze. "Detective, something's not right." Clara knelt again, her eyes scanning the remains. "What is it?" "Look here," Rhea said, pointing to the edges of Lila's arms. "No pooling under the body, and the soil around her, it's disturbed differently. See that lighter layer? She wasn't decomposing here, she was moved." Clara's brow furrowed. "Moved? After death?" Rhea nodded grimly. "Most likely, maybe even days later." The revelation hit like a gust of cold air. Someone had hidden her once, then dug her up only to bury her again. The bleach, the new boards, the too clean house. It all made sense now. Evan hadn't panicked. He'd planned. Clara straightened, glancing toward the basement door where a uniformed officer stood guard. "Where's Marsh?" "Still upstairs," the officer said, watching the whole thing through the window. "Good," Clara said softly. "Let him watch." Rhea's team carefully lifted the remains, sealing them in a white body bag. The hiss of the zipper seemed to echo louder than it should have. When they carried the bag up the stairs, Evan stepped back, face drained of all pretense. For the first time, he looked afraid. "Mr. Marsh," Clara said, her voice calm, almost kind. "We'll need you to come down to the station. There are some inconsistencies we need to clear up." His lips parted, the mask of grief slipping into something brittle. "You think I did this? I think you know more than you've told me." He gave a small, bitter laugh. "You don't have a clue, do you? You're chasing ghosts." Clara didn't respond. She only watched him as the body bag passed between them, a silent accusation between husband and detective. Outside, the first flash of camera lights erupted as the coroner's van doors closed. Reporters had already begun to gather, hungry for tragedy. Evan stood frozen in the doorway, a man cornered by his own creation. Clara turned to Rhea. "Get those soil samples to the lab. I want confirmation on the secondary burial and check for transfer fibers. Anything that doesn't match this house." Rhea nodded. "You think someone helped him move her?" Clara's gaze drifted toward the upstairs window, where the curtains fluttered as if hiding a secret. "No," she said quietly. "I think someone watched him do it." Thunder rumbled faintly across the horizon. The case had broken open, but what lay beneath the stairs wasn't to the end. It was only the beginning of what had been buried far deeper. The interrogation room was small, airless, the kind of space that pressed down on people until they broke. The hum of the fluorescent light above flickered like a heartbeat, uneven and relentless. Evan Marsh sat at the metal table, hands cuffed, his once careful composure gone. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt creased, a man unraveling by the hour. Clara watched him through the observation window for several long minutes before stepping inside. She set a folder on the table, no words, no pleasantries, just the cold whisper of paper meeting metal. Inside were the photographs, the basement, the sheets, the ring still clinging to bone. Evan didn't look at them at first. He stared at his reflection in the one-way glass, lips moving soundlessly. Then finally he muttered, "You think that's justice? Showing me what you did down there?" Clara's voice was steady. "You did that, Evan, not me." His laugh came brittle, sharp. "You don't get it. None of this was supposed to happen." Clara leaned forward. "Then tell me what was supposed to happen." For a moment he was silent, eyes darting toward the ceiling, toward escape that wasn't there. Then his shoulders sagged. "She wasn't supposed to die," he said quietly. "She was supposed to disappear." Clara felt her pulse quicken. "Disappear? Why?" Evan exhaled shakily, fingers tightening around the edge of the table. "She was planning to leave me, to run away. I found the messages, the suitcases, the burner phone, after everything I did for her." His voice faltered, trembling between grief and rage. "I just wanted her to understand what it would feel like to lose someone." Clara's voice lowered. "So you planned her disappearance?" He nodded slowly. "I thought if she vanished for a few days, if she saw what it did to me, to her friends, and she'd come back, I'd be the devastated husband, and she'd see how much I loved her." "Love doesn't stage kidnappings, Evan," Clara said. His eyes glistened, a mix of guilt and stubborn pride. "You didn't know her like I did. She was slipping away, I could feel it. Every smile, every look that wasn't meant for me. She was planning something." "Who's M?" That name hit him like a jolt. He froze, then gave a small humorless smile. "Of course you found that." "Tell me." He hesitated, then whispered. "Mark Ellery, contractor. Worked with me on the house remodel. They met here. He was helping her." Clara's voice sharpened. "Helping her how?" "Escape." Evan spat. "He was going to drive her out of town. New identity, new start, away from me." She thought I didn't know. His breathing quickened, memories clawing their way up. "But I did. I knew everything." Clara's tone softened slightly. "What happened the night she disappeared?" Evan pressed his palms to his face. "We fought. She said she was done pretending. I told her we could fix it, that I'd change. But she laughed. She actually laughed. Said I couldn't control her anymore." He swallowed hard. I grabbed her arm. She pulled away, slipped, hit the stairs. "It was an accident." His voice cracked. "An accident." Clara's jaw tightened. "So you buried her?" He looked up, eyes glassy with desperation. "You don't understand. I panicked. She wasn't breathing. And all I could think was that I ruined everything. So I made it look like she left, took her phone, her car keys. It was supposed to look clean. And when you realized the police were closing in?" His expression twisted. "She wouldn't stay buried." Clara froze. "What do you mean?" He looked past her, somewhere distant, trembling. "Mark came back. I think he found her before you did. The boards were different, not how I left them. He moved her, tried to cover it up, maybe to protect himself, I don't know." Clara felt the chill crawl up her spine. "Do you have proof?" Evan gave a weak, bitter smile. "Go ask him. He'll tell you his side. Just don't turn your back on him." He leaned forward suddenly, eyes burning. "I never wanted her dead. You believe me, don't you, detective? I just wanted her home." Clara stared at him. The tears, the cracks, the confession hanging in the air like smoke. Somewhere in that fractured truth was the moment everything had gone too far. She rose quietly, gathering the folder. "You wanted her to disappear," she said. "Now you both have." As she left the room, the sound of Evan's sobbing followed her. Low, uneven, human. Outside, she met Captain Reyes in the hallway. "We'll bring Mark Ellery in," he said grimly. "Warrant's already on its way." Clara nodded, though her thoughts were elsewhere. On Lila's drafts, her whispered fear, the way she'd written, "I think he knows." Someone had tried to help her. Someone had gone back to hide what was left. The storm had ended, but in Clara's gut, the next one was already forming. The Marsh house stood silent beneath a pale winter sun, paint flaking, yard overgrown, curtains drawn tight like eyelids refusing to open. The for sale sign out front leaned slightly, one corner broken, as if even the house had given up pretending to be desirable. Detective Clara Wren stepped out of her car and stood still for a long moment, letting the cold air fill her lungs. It had been 6 months since the case closed. 6 months since Evan Marsh was sentenced to 25 years for manslaughter and obstruction. The tabloids had called it the vanishing wife case, complete with glossy headlines and shallow sympathy. But Clara knew better. There was no vanishing, only erasure. One man's desperate attempt to rewrite the woman who refused to love him back. The key turned stiffly in the lock. The door groaned open. Dust swirled in the light, cutting through half-open blinds, painting soft beams across the hollow living room. The furniture was gone, but the echoes remained. The sharp edge of a fight, the hollow laughter from old dinner parties, the silence that followed too often. She took a slow step inside. Her boots left faint prints in the thin film of dust coating the floor. Every sound, the creak of the boards, the shift of air, carried weight. Down the hallway, she saw it. The door to the basement, still scarred from when officers had pried it open that night. The brass handle was tarnished, cold to the touch. Clara hesitated before descending the stairs, her hand gliding along the wall for balance. The basement smelled of mildew and memory. It had been cleaned, sealed, sterilized, but nothing could erase the history etched into the boards. Yellow evidence markers still clung faintly to the concrete, their adhesive edges curling. She crouched near the spot where Lila had been found. The faint outline of chalk remained, barely visible beneath a layer of clear protective resin. For a long moment, Clara just stared at it. This was where fear ended, she thought, and where truth began. She pulled a folded report from her coat. Her final case summary, the last piece of unfinished business. The words were clinical, detached. Victim identified as Lila Marsh, 34. Cause of death: blunt force trauma consistent with fall impact. Evidence suggests post-mortem concealment. Secondary burial confirmed. But beneath the official language, her own notes told another story. One written not for the department, but for herself. He said she was supposed to disappear. She already had long before the night she died, piece by piece, erased by love that called itself protection. Clara sighed softly, running a finger along the floor where the boards met concrete. She remembered the sound of Evan's voice, broken, pitiful, but never sorry. He'd wept for himself, not for her. And Mark Ellery, the so-called savior. His involvement had ended with a plea deal. Accessory after the fact. He'd helped move the body, he said, to keep Evan from getting caught. Fear and guilt tangled together. Another man deciding what Lila's story should be. The tragedy wasn't just the violence, it was how ordinary it all was, how familiar. Clara stood gazing at the empty space beneath the stairs. The boards gleamed faintly under the sunlight, seeping through a crack in the foundation. For a moment it looked almost peaceful, a resting place made sacred by sorrow. She pulled out her pen and wrote the final line of her report directly at the bottom margin, where no one else would read it. Monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they live in daylight, smiling. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket. A message from Captain Reyes. Case closed in records. Good work, Wren. Take a break for once. She smiled faintly, but didn't respond. Instead, she walked slowly around the basement one last time, tracing invisible paths with her eyes. The roots of fear, control, and desperation that had once filled this house. As she climbed the stairs, each step creaked beneath her, as if the wood itself remembered. Every fight, every plea, every secret whispered too late. At the top, she paused. The light through the cracked blinds caught dust motes dancing like ghosts. In her mind, she saw Lila again, laughing in a photograph, sunlight on her face, unaware of the darkness growing beside her. Clara whispered almost to the air, "You're free now." Then she closed the door behind her. Outside, the wind moved through the dying garden, bending the tall grass with a gentle sigh. Across the street, a sold sticker flapped against the signpost, a new beginning for someone else unaware of what had once been buried beneath those stairs. Clara looked back only once. The sunlight hit the front window, and for a brief, fleeting second it looked like someone was standing there, watching her go. She didn't stop walking. Some houses, she thought, never truly empty. They remember. And beneath those stairs, where truth and guilt had met, the silence still waited. Patient, unchanging, eternal.